They tell you the Earth is layered like a textbook diagram: crust, mantle, core. Clean boundaries, predictable physics, a planet you can model on a whiteboard. That is a story we tell children so they can sleep. In the real world, the deepest hole ever drilled didn't even scratch the crust, and that fact used to comfort me. It meant there were places we couldn't reach, places our hands couldn't ruin. Then we built the Lazarus rig. Officially, it was an energy project, a geothermal initiative, the kind of thing that looks good in press releases and earns standing ovations at climate summits. Unofficially, it was a race between agencies that didn't trust each other and corporations that feared being left behind. I didn't sign up for politics. I signed up because I was a drilling engineer with a background in extreme pressure systems, and someone offered me a contract that would pay off my father's medical debt and my own student loans in one neat transfer. They flew me to a desert facility that didn't appear on any map. Not the romantic kind of hidden base either. No guard towers, no dramatic fences, just empty land, heat shimmer, and a cluster of beige buildings that looked like they were waiting to be forgotten. The rig itself sat beyond them, half sunk into reinforced concrete like a needle pinned into the skin of the world. It wasn't a traditional drill. The Lazarus rig used a hybrid system, thermal plasma cutting to soften rock, and a rotating diamond head to clear it. But the real miracle was the sheath, a segmented column of metamaterial rings that could flex, self-seal microfractures, and withstand pressures that should have collapsed it into glitter. On my first day, a man in a suit I didn't recognize shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, you're about to make history." He didn't tell me history makes a sound when it breaks. My team lived underground in a connected set of modules: sleeping bunks, a galley, a control, room and medical. 12 of us, rotating in shifts. Minimal outside contact. Phones collected. Email restricted. Any personal messages filtered through a liaison who smiled too much and asked too few questions. At first, it felt like every other high-risk job. Procedures, checklists, sensors, alarms that screamed when something twitched outside expected parameters. We began the descent with the kind of excitement you only see in people who don't fully understand what they're doing yet. The first kilometers were boring, sediment and basalt, heat rising steadily, the drill column humming in the sheath like a tuned instrument. We watched the monitors, drank burnt coffee, and argued about football teams like men trying to prove the world was still normal. By day 9, we were past any depth record humanity had ever touched. By day 14, the rock stopped behaving like rock. It wasn't a clean change, not a line you could point to and say, "Here." It started as noise as data. Seismic reflections returning half a second too early. Density readings that suggested voids where there shouldn't be any. The kind of anomalies that happen when sensors drift or software misinterprets a spike. Then we hit a layer that sang. Not out loud, not in the air, in the instruments. The magnetometers began to pulse in patterns that didn't match the drill rotation or the Earth's field. The geophones picked up rhythmic tremors that didn't match any known tectonic activity. One of the geologists, Dr. Sato, leaned close to the screen and muttered, "That looks like a heartbeat." We laughed at him, because the alternative was to take him seriously. But after that, the anomalies multiplied. The drill sheath warmed and cooled in waves, like it was breathing. The pressure readings dipped and rose as if something down there was adjusting its grip. We reported it up the chain. We expected a pause, an analysis, maybe a stand down. Instead, we got a single message. From oversight, continue. They didn't even pretend to be curious. They sounded hungry. On day 21, we reached the boundary they called the mantle interface, though later I understood that name was a comfort blanket, a way of pretending what we were doing had rules. The drill head encountered a material that should not have existed. The torque dropped, not because the drill was slipping, but because it was suddenly moving through something with almost no resistance. The thermal sensors, which had been climbing toward catastrophic failure for a week, fell sharply, cold. Down there, where it should have been molten and violent, we found cold. A murmur ran through the control room. Everyone leaned closer to their screens, as if proximity could force reality to behave. "Void," Sato said quietly. "We've entered a void." The drill camera feed should have been useless at that depth. No light, no clarity, just the tight tunnel walls and the occasional smear of sediment. But when the drill head broke through, the feed stabilized and showed nothing. Not darkness, not rock. Nothing in the way your eyes understand it when they stare at an empty sky and realize there's no ceiling. The tunnel ended in a perfect circle, and beyond it was a smooth expanse that swallowed the camera's light without reflecting a single photon back. The camera didn't show black. It showed absence. My mouth went dry. I checked the diagnostics, hunting for the comforting explanation of failure. Bad sensor, corrupted stream, software artifact. Then the rig trembled. Not the usual vibration. Not the mechanical shiver of a billion-dollar machine biting into stone. This was a single, deliberate jolt, as if something far below had bumped the drill column with a knuckle and waited for us to react. The alarm lights didn't flash. The systems didn't register a quake. The tremor moved through the rig like a message passed along bone. Sato whispered, "It knows." "Don't," I said too sharply. "Don't do that. Don't anthropomorphize it." But even as I spoke, one of the technicians, Mara, pointed at the magnetometer feed with a shaking finger. The pulses had changed. They were no longer rhythmic, no longer natural. They were grouped now, with pauses between them that looked like spacing, like punctuation. Our linguist consultant wasn't supposed to be on shift. We didn't even know why we had a linguist assigned to a drilling project until that moment. Dr. Klein stepped forward, pale and silent, and stared at the pattern for a long time. Then he said, "It's not random." "What is it?" I asked. He swallowed. His eyes looked wet, but he didn't blink. "It's a response." "To what?" Mara said. Klein's voice dropped, as if he was afraid the microphones might carry it downward. "To us." The drill camera feed flickered once. Just a hiccup, a blink. And in that blink, the empty expanse, beyond the tunnel, wasn't empty anymore. For a fraction of a second, the camera caught a shape that made my mind recoil. Not because it was grotesque, not because it was bloody or monstrous, because it was precise. A flat surface slid across the opening like a lid, seamless as polished stone. It covered the tunnel mouth, sealing it perfectly, as if the earth had grown a door. Then it moved again, and a thin line appeared down the center. A seam. Something was on the other side, aligning itself with our breach. The seam widened, slowly, with the calm patience of something that did not fear us. It opened just enough for the camera to glimpse what waited within. A corridor, not carved, not broken, not natural. A corridor with walls so smooth they looked poured, stretching away into the distance in a straight line that should not have been possible inside a sphere. And along the walls were faint markings that pulsed in the same rhythm as the magnetometer. Klein's face went grey. I heard myself whisper, "That's not geology." The corridor pulsed once, like a breath. And then, far down its length, something moved toward us. Not fast, not rushed, like it had all the time in the world. Because it did. I backed away from the console without meaning to. My chair scraped the floor. The sound was small, pathetic, human. The drill camera zoomed automatically, drawn by the motion detection routine. The moving shape resolved into a silhouette that made my stomach drop. It was tall, wrongly proportioned, limbs too long, joints bending with an economy that suggested it wasn't built for our gravity. It stopped at a distance that felt deliberate, as if it knew exactly how much of itself we could handle seeing. And then the corridor lights, which hadn't existed a second ago, brightened in a slow, steady wave, revealing the walls more clearly. The markings weren't random. They were letters, not English, not any language I recognized. But the structure of them, the spacing, the repeated forms, made Klein breathe a single sentence like a prayer. "It's writing." The silhouette raised one hand, not a wave, not a threat. A gesture like someone reaching for a door handle. The rig shuddered again, harder this time, and somewhere deep inside the Lazarus column, a warning chime finally triggered, delayed by the depth, the distance, the sheer arrogance of our design. Structural integrity compromised. Mara turned to me, eyes wide. "We have to retract." I wanted to agree. I wanted to shout orders and slam buttons and do the thing men do in movies when they save everyone. But the corridor figure didn't move like prey. It moved like an owner approaching a trespasser. And when the seam in that door widened another inch, I understood something cold and final. We hadn't drilled into the earth. We drilled into whatever the earth was built to contain. No one spoke for a full 3 seconds after the warning chime sounded. That doesn't sound like much, but in a control room built for constant chatter and overlapping callouts, silence that long feels like suffocation. Then training kicked in. "Kill forward motion," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "Lock the head. Prep retraction." Mara's hands flew over the console. Forward motion killed. Retraction motors responding. "Wait," she frowned. "They're lagging." "How bad?" "Milliseconds. But it's not normal." Nothing was normal anymore. On the camera feed, the corridor remained perfectly still. The silhouette hadn't advanced. It hadn't retreated. It simply waited, framed by walls that reflected light in a way that made depth hard to judge. The markings along the corridor pulsed again, slower this time, and the magnetometers followed suit like obedient echoes. Klein was whispering to himself. Not words I could make out, just fragments of breath and disbelief. "Talk to me," I snapped. "What are you seeing?" He dragged a hand down his face. "Structure, repetition, syntax." He pointed to the markings. "Whatever this is, it's not decorative. It's not symbolic in the way cave art is symbolic. This is functional language." "For who?" Sato asked. Klein didn't answer immediately. His eyes never left the screen. For something that expected to be read. The retraction motors groaned through the rig, a deep mechanical strain that traveled up the drill column and into my teeth. Numbers began to scroll red on my display. Mara swore. "We're stuck. Define stuck." The sheath's responding, but the head isn't clearing the boundary. It's like the tunnel mouth is gripping it. I looked at the camera feed again. The seam around the tunnel opening had closed slightly, narrowing with deliberate slowness, like a jaw easing shut. "Is it moving?" Sato asked. "No," Mara said. "The material around it is. Pressure's rising unevenly like it's molding." A cold realization slid into place. "It's not collapsing," I said. "It's sealing." As if in response to being named, the corridor lights brightened another fraction. The silhouette shifted its weight. One long limb bent at an angle my knee couldn't replicate without snapping. Klein sucked in a sharp breath. "It's closer." "No," I said, though my heart disagreed. The camera zoom changed. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't the full truth. The corridor had depth, but it also had intent. The distance between us felt negotiable, like something that could be adjusted if it decided to. Another alarm chimed, this one lower, more urgent. "Subsurface pressure anomaly detected." Sato leaned toward his screen. "We're getting counter-seismic waves. Something's propagating upward along the drill path." "From where?" Mara asked. "From below, us." My stomach tightened. "How fast?" Sato didn't answer right away. His fingers danced across the controls, pulling up graphs that looked less like geology and more like medical readouts. "Too fast," he said finally. faster than any known wave in solid rock. Klein's voice was hoarse. It's responding. To the drill? Mara asked. To us, he said. To the breach. To being seen. The silhouette raised its head. I don't know how I knew that's what it was doing. There were no eyes I could see, no face in any human sense, just a smooth, elongated upper mass that angled upward slightly, as if acknowledging our presence. And then the markings on the wall changed. They didn't rearrange. They didn't animate in a way that looked like screens or projections. They grew. New characters extruded from the wall surface, pushing out as if the corridor itself were writing in real time. The pulses on the magnetometer sharpened, aligning, into clusters that made Klein's hands start shaking. It's adding information, he said, layering it. For what purpose? I asked. He looked at me then, and I saw fear stripped of abstraction. For comprehension. The rig lurched, not violently, not enough to throw anyone from their seat, just enough to make it clear something had taken hold of us from the inside. Mara cried out, structural integrity dropping, the sheath's compensating, but it's being tested, like it's being flexed. By pressure? I asked. No, she said. By something that knows how much force to apply. On the camera feed, the silhouette lowered its arm and placed its hand against the corridor wall. The wall rippled outward from the point of contact in a perfect circle, and our drill head shuddered in sympathy. A new feed popped onto my display without anyone calling it up. A diagnostic we didn't have clearance to access, tagged with an internal label I'd never seen. Containment. Status. Degraded. I stared at it. Who authorized that protocol? No one answered. The liaison, the man in the suit who'd welcomed me on day one, appeared on the main screen. His image was grainy, delayed, like the signal had traveled through something thick and resistant. Maintain position, he said calmly. Do not retract further. My jaw clenched. We're losing control of the drill. I'm aware. Something down there is interacting with our systems. I'm aware. Then pull us out, I said. We have visual confirmation of what? He interrupted. Say it. I hesitated. The word creature felt inadequate, being felt wrong. An entity, I said. The liaison nodded once, as if checking a box. Proceed. With what? Mara demanded, leaning toward the microphone. It's closing around us. Continue the interface, he said. We need more data. Sato spun toward me. You can't be serious. I'm not, I said. He is. The liaison's eyes flicked to Sato. Doctor, the Lazarus rig was not designed to fail safely. It was designed to reach something. Something you knew was there, Klein said softly. A beat. Then, we suspected. The corridor markings pulsed brighter. The silhouette took a single step forward. Not toward us. Sideways. And suddenly, the geometry of the corridor made sense in the worst possible way. It wasn't a straight passage. It was a ring. The camera perspective twisted as the corridor walls rotated relative to the drill opening, revealing that the space curved around us, encircling the breach like a throat. Mara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. It's not approaching us. It's surrounding us, Sato said. The retraction motors screamed as Mara pushed them past safe limits. It's not letting go. The tunnel diameter is shrinking. Emergency. Sever, I said. Cut the head. She looked at me in horror. That'll strand the lower column. I know. And if it collapses upward, I know. The liaison's voice cut in, sharp now. You are not authorized to sever. I slammed my hand down on the console, pain flaring. You are not here. I am. Another tremor ran through the rig, stronger this time. Tools rattled. A crack snaked across one of the auxiliary displays. On the camera feed, the silhouette raised both arms. The corridor walls responded, seams appearing where there had been none, opening into adjoining spaces that revealed more corridors branching away, endless, uniform, deliberate. This wasn't a chamber, it was infrastructure. Klein's voice broke. This isn't a prison cell. It's a system, I said. The liaison inhaled slowly. You're seeing the interface layer. For what? Mara shouted. For containment, he said, and communication. The magnetometers spiked, then dropped to 0. Every display flickered at once. For half a second, the control room was lit only by emergency strips, casting everything in red. When the screens came back, the camera feed was gone. In its place was a simple text line, rendered in a font so clean it made my skin crawl. Contact established. Below it, another line appeared. Do not withdraw. Something knocked against the rig from the inside, not the drill head, the column itself, as if something had entered the tunnel behind the camera and was climbing upward, using our own machinery as a guide. Mara screamed. We've got movement inside the sheath. Sato's face drained of color. That's impossible. I stared at the status readout, watching pressure readings spike in segments, ascending in a pattern that matched the spacing of the sheath rings. Step, step, step. Whatever was below the crust had found our way in, and it was coming up. The first thing you learn in deep drill work is this. The ground is always trying to kill you. Pressure wants in, heat wants out. Rock wants to become a liquid with your bones in it. But we had built Lazarus to bully the planet, to shove a spear into the earth and demand it answer back. Now the earth was answering. Mara slapped the intercom. All hands, emergency protocol. Clear the shaft room, seal bulkheads. A chorus of acknowledgements crackled back from the module speakers. Boots pounded in the corridor outside the control room. The rig's main column ran down through an armored shaft that cut the living modules in half like a spine. We'd drilled deep enough that the column wasn't just equipment anymore. It was architecture. It was a hallway for something that didn't need permission. I leaned over Mara's console. Where is the movement? She pulled up a segmented map of the sheath rings, each one labeled with depth, temperature tolerance, and structural load. A line of red indicators climbed upward. One ring, then the next, like a cursor moving along a path. It's inside the sheath, she said. Not outside pressure. Internal contact. Sato's voice came thin. How can anything survive in that environment? My eyes flicked to the pressure readings. They weren't consistent. Not even close. The segments the red indicator passed through showed localized drops, as if the environment inside the sheath was being altered around whatever was moving. It's not surviving it, I said. It's changing it. Klein stared at the text on the main screen. Do not withdraw. Is that from the rig? Mara asked. Klein shook his head slowly. No, the rig doesn't output language. Someone pushed that into the interface. Someone, Sato repeated, like the word tasted wrong. I did a quick mental inventory of what mattered. 12 people, 1 shaft, 1 exit elevator, 1 drill column that now contained a climbing unknown. Outside, a desert facility staffed by security in suits. If they wanted to contain this, they would. They'd bury us down here and call it an accident. And the liaison had already told us to maintain position. Cut comms, I said. Mara blinked. What? Cut comms with oversight. Kill outbound. Do it. She hesitated, then flipped a series of toggles. The main uplink lights shifted from green to amber to dead red. The liaison's face vanished from the display. For a fraction of a second, relief moved through me like warmth. Then every monitor in the room blinked, and the text came back anyway. Comms unnecessary. Mara's mouth fell open. It's not coming through the uplink. Klein's hands trembled against the edge of the desk. It's inside our network. Sato backed away from his station as if the screens might spit something out. That's not possible. There's no signal path from the drill head to... Another tremor. Not a single jolt this time, but a rolling wave that traveled through the floor, through the walls, through the metal ribs of our module like a hand dragging nails across a drum. From the shaft room, someone screamed. It wasn't a drawn-out cry. It was a sharp, involuntary burst, the kind you make when pain bypasses thought. Mara shot to her feet. That's... I was already moving. The control room door slid open with a hiss. The corridor beyond was lit in emergency red, making every surface look wet. The air smelled of ozone and hot insulation. The shaft room lay 50 meters down the hall, behind two bulkhead doors designed to isolate catastrophic failures. The first bulkhead was still open. Two technicians stood in the hall, frozen, staring through the open doorway as if something inside had shown them a picture they couldn't unsee. "Move!" I barked, shoving past them. Inside, the shaft room was a cathedral of metal. The drill column descended through the center, a segmented spine of rings and braces vanishing into darkness below. Catwalks circled it at multiple levels. The whole structure hummed with tension, and the column was vibrating, not like machinery, like a throat trying to speak. A man named Dyer, one of the maintenance guys, ex-military steady hands, was on the catwalk nearest the column. He was backing away slowly, eyes wide, face slick with sweat. "What happened?" I demanded. He tried to answer, but his mouth just worked soundlessly for a second. Then he forced words out. It's coming through." "Through what?" He pointed with a shaking finger at the drill column. A seam had appeared between two sheath rings. Not a crack, not stress fracture, a clean, deliberate separation, like a zipper being opened from the inside. The seam widened, a pale shape pressed against it. My body locked up. Every survival instinct I owned screamed at me to run, but my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing, and that fraction of hesitation cost us. The seam split further. A hand emerged, not a human hand. Too long, too many joints. Fingers like articulated cables, each segment bending with mechanical precision. The surface wasn't skin. It wasn't metal either. It looked like ceramic that had learned how to flex. It gripped the edge of the sheath ring and pulled. The ring groaned as if the whole rig were being peeled open. Dyer stumbled backward and nearly fell. "Shoot it!" he shouted, voice cracking. No one had weapons down here. Not officially, but security had insisted on contingency kits stored in locked cabinets. We joked about them. Emergency flare guns, stun batons, the theater of safety. Now the joke was dead. Mara's voice came over the intercom, frantic. "Movement's breached level 2. It's in the shaft room." I stared at that hand. It held the ring like it was testing it, measuring, resistance, learning the material. Then the fingers tapped the metal. 1, 2, 3. The column answered with a sympathetic vibration that rattled bolts in the ceiling. Klein's voice crackled into my earpiece. He had followed me out of the control room, but he stayed back in the corridor, unwilling to step inside. It's communicating." "By tapping?" I muttered. "It's using resonance," he said. "Like a tuning fork. Like..." He swallowed audibly. "Like it can speak through structures." The hand withdrew slightly. Then, impossibly, the drill column lights, small maintenance strips embedded along the braces, began to turn on in sequence, illuminating segments as the thing climbed. Upward, ring by ring, the lights followed it, a moving halo of clarity. It wanted us to see it. Dyer whispered, "No, no, no, no." The seam widened again, and the rest of the limb emerged, followed by an elongated shoulder, then a head. It was not wearing anything. It didn't need to. Its form was a single integrated structure, built for pressure, for heat, for darkness, built to move through rock like water. It had no eyes I could identify, but it turned its head toward us anyway, and I felt, with absolute certainty, that it was looking directly at me. In the corridor behind, someone retched. The sound echoed. The entity didn't flinch. It raised its free hand and extended a single finger toward the wall-mounted emergency panel beside the shaft. The panel had a glass cover and a big red lever labeled Emergency Retraction Override. The entity touched the glass. The glass frosted instantly, not with cold, but with a fine crystalline pattern that spread like a living circuit. The panel lights blinked, then switched to a status I'd never seen. Manual control, accepted. I lunged forward, reflexive, stupid, driven by the need to stop it from touching anything else. My boots hit the catwalk with a metallic bang. The entity's head snapped toward me with sudden speed. Not hostile, not startled, interested. A voice sounded in my skull, not words through ears, not sound in air. A thought that wasn't mine. Withdrawal harms the seal. I froze so hard my joints ached. My mouth opened but nothing came out. Dyer screamed again, this time in raw panic, and ran for the corridor. His boots hammered the catwalk. The entity didn't chase him. Instead, it lowered its hand from the panel and placed both palms against the drill column. The entire shaft room hummed. Bolts rattled. The catwalk vibrated under my feet. And then, deep below, something answered back. Not a machine. A presence. A pressure against the mind, like standing too close to a generator, like your thoughts were being pulled into a magnetic field. Klein's voice in my ear was trembling. It's calling something. Sato's voice joined, barely coherent. The counter-seismic waves, they're increasing. The entity lifted its head, as if listening to something far below us, something massive shifting in darkness. Then it looked at me again, and another thought arrived, clean and terrifying. You broke the lid. The shaft room lights dimmed and flared, as if power was being rerouted to serve a system that wasn't ours. The emergency bulkhead behind me slammed shut with a boom that shook dust from the ceiling. We were sealed in with it, and the drill column, the proud spear we'd driven into the planet, began to retract on its own, slowly, smoothly, without any command from us, not to save us, to bring something up. The drill column retracting on its own should have been impossible. Retraction required a coordinated sequence, tension redistribution across the sheath rings, thermal equalization, rotational braking, and a dozen safety interlocks meant to prevent exactly what was happening now. The Lazarus rig was designed to move only when we commanded it, but the column wasn't moving like a machine following orders. It was moving like a tendon tightening. Slow, certain, alive in its purpose. Dyer pounded on the sealed bulkhead from the far side, his voice muffled and frantic through the thick composite door. Open it! Open the damn door! I ran to the emergency panel and tried the manual release. The keypad flashed an angry red and displayed a message I didn't recognize. Access denied. Containment event. Containment. That word again. Mara's voice crackled through my earpiece, distorted by interference. Where are you? In the shaft room, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Bulkhead slammed shut. We're locked in. Who triggered it? I didn't. A pause, then a whisper. We're seeing control overrides across the whole facility. It's not just down there. It's in everything. I looked back at the entity. It stood near the drill column, with both hands still resting against it, palms flat, as if feeling a pulse through the metal. The frosted crystalline pattern it had spread across the emergency panel glass was now climbing along the wall in branching lines, creeping into conduits and seams. Not ice, not fungus. Something like circuitry grown from geometry. Sato came into the shaft room from the maintenance stairwell, breathing hard, face white. The counter-seismic waves just hit the surface sensors, he said. Something is propagating upward along our path like it's using the drill tunnel as a waveguide. Klein followed him only to the doorway, refusing to step fully inside. His eyes were fixed on the entity with the expression of a man watching a loaded gun decide whether it remembers what it was built for. The entity turned its head slightly, as if acknowledging the new arrivals. Another thought landed in my skull, directed at me with clinical clarity. The path is open. The surface is thin. Sato flinched. "Did you hear?" "Yes," I said. "I heard." Mara's voice, louder now, almost shouting. "We're getting a readout from the lower column. It's flooding our system with status messages. Like it's talking in our language." My eyes snapped to the shaft room monitors. The nearest display was cycling through a rapid series of diagnostics. Temperatures, pressures, magnetic flux. Then a new field appeared. Integrity of seal, critical, and beneath it, surface biologicals, unintentional. I swallowed. Unintentional. Klein's voice came ragged. "We're collateral." The drill column continued its slow ascent, bringing the deepest segment closer. Somewhere far below, an enormous pressure shifted, like a sleeping giant rolling over. The entity lifted one hand from the column and pointed toward a maintenance hatch on the far wall. A simple service door that led into the auxiliary tunnels that ran around the shaft. The thought came again. Move. Survive. It wasn't a command that felt cruel. It felt like a warning given by something that didn't understand why you wouldn't obey. Sato's hands trembled. "It wants us to leave. It wants us out of the way," I said. The corridor behind us erupted in noise. Boots shouting, metal clanging. The other technicians had reached the bulkhead from the outside and were trying to override it manually. Their voices bled through the comm system. "Why won't it open? Power's dead on this side. Get the cutters." Mara's voice snapped in my ear. Something just happened on the surface. The main elevator. A shriek of static cut her off. Then the lights in the shaft room flickered, and the rig's deep vibration changed pitch. Lower, heavier, like a massive mechanism engaging. The entity turned its head toward the descending sound, and for the first time, I felt something from it that resembled urgency, not safe above. My pulse hammered. What's happening? The monitors filled with new data, streaming in too fast for our software to pass, but one line stood out, bold and clean. Retraction complete in 0:13:48. 13 minutes. 13 minutes until whatever lay below reached the facility level. I forced myself to move. "We need to get everyone out, now!" Sato stared at me like I'd suggested swimming through lava. "Out where?" "We're underground in a classified desert site." "Then we get to the surface anyway," I said. "We find air, distance, anything." Klein's voice was brittle. "If it's using our tunnel as a conduit, the surface might not matter." "Survival is still a plan," I said. "Panic isn't." The entity moved, not toward us, toward the maintenance hatch it had indicated, long limbs stepping with eerie grace across the catwalk. It stopped beside the hatch and placed a fingertip against the metal. The hatch lock clicked open. Then the entity stepped back, as if presenting it. Sato's eyes widened. It just bypassed the lock. "It bypassed everything," I said. Dyer's muffled pounding stopped abruptly on the other side of the bulkhead. A second later, his voice came through, distorted, trembling. "Something's in the corridor. It's not alone down there anymore." Cold washed through me. "Dyer, describe it." He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his words tumbled out in a rush. "Not like this one. Smaller. Fast. Like joints on backwards legs. It ran past the door and the lights went out behind it. It was moving toward the control. Modules." Mara's voice returned, shaky, breathless. "We've got breaches in the living corridor. I repeat, breaches. Something came up through the conduit spaces like it knew the layout." I looked at the entity again. "Did you bring it?" The thought that came back wasn't defensive. It was matter of fact. "There are always others. You opened the way." A scream echoed from somewhere deeper in the facility, carried through vents and metal like a knife dragged across bone. Sato flinched. Klein looked like he might collapse. I forced my body forward, toward the maintenance hatch the entity had opened. "We're not staying here." Mara crackled over comms. "Where are you going?" "Octanels," I said, "toward the surface access ladder." "That's a maze," she said. "No one uses those except maintenance." "Then we learn fast," I replied. I looked back at the entity one last time. It stood still, watching us, head tilted in that unsettling imitation of attention. The drill column continued retracting behind it, the deep segments inching upward toward the facility like a throat swallowing something massive. The entity sent one final thought, quieter than the others, almost resigned. "When it reaches you, do not listen." My skin prickled. Listen to what? But it didn't answer. Instead, it stepped to the side and let us pass through the hatch. Sato hesitated at the threshold. "This is insane." "Yes," I said. "Now move." We slipped into the auxiliary tunnel, a narrow metal passage that smelled of dust, oil, and old heat. Emergency strips flickered overhead. Somewhere behind us, the shaft room vibrated as the drill column rose, rising. And somewhere ahead, something skittered through darkness, using our walls like rails. Our comms sputtered. Mara whispered, "I hear something in the vents." Then the line cut. In the silence that followed, the facility felt suddenly enormous and empty, like a ship after the crew abandons it. We ran anyway, because 13 minutes was an eternity, and not nearly enough time. The auxiliary tunnel swallowed us like a throat. The hatch sealed behind with a soft click that felt far too final, and for a moment I stood there with my palm against the metal, listening to the vibration of the shaft room through the wall. The drill column was still retracting, still humming, still doing exactly what it shouldn't. Sato's headlamp beam jittered ahead, catching pipes, junction boxes, and old warning labels that looked like they'd been slapped onto the walls to satisfy regulations no one respected down here. This section of the facility was the kind of place that existed because engineers needed access, not because anyone wanted to be here. It was narrow enough that if you panicked, you could die just from your own breathing. Klein moved behind me, silent, breathing in short bursts as if he was trying not to inhale too deeply. Maybe he thought the air itself had become contaminated with whatever we'd woken. I didn't blame him. A thump echoed somewhere, in the tunnel network. Not close, not far, just enough to let us know the place was no longer empty. Sato whispered, "That wasn't us." "No," I said, "keep moving." We jogged, boots clanging on metal grating. Every sound felt too loud. In a mining collapse, noise can be life. In a place where something hunts by resonance, noise is a flare. I kept thinking about the entity's last warning. Do not listen. Not, don't look. Not, don't touch. Don't listen. As if sound was the real infection. My comm unit hissed with faint static. I tapped it twice. "Mara, do you copy?" Nothing. The silence wasn't comforting. It was worse. Silence meant we had lost eyes, lost coordination, lost context. In a disaster, ignorance is the first killer. A junction sign overhead read, AUX, loop, B, vent riser, surface, access ladder, C. Ladder C, I muttered, more to myself than anyone. That's our best shot. Sato's voice shook. If the elevator's compromised... "We don't need the elevator," I said. "We need out." Klein's breath hitched. "Out where? The desert? A perimeter full of armed security who will shoot us before they let this leave the facility." I didn't answer, because he was right. But I also wasn't going to stop running. Another sound, closer now. A rapid series of taps along the wall to our left. Like fingernails. Like something testing the paneling. Sato froze. "Did you hear?" "Yes," I said. The tapping stopped. A second later, it resumed behind us, farther back along the tunnel, following our motion like it was triangulating the vibration of our footsteps. Klein whispered, "It's tracking us." "Then we stop giving it an easy signal," I said. I grabbed Sato's sleeve and pulled him forward. Walk, don't run. Heel to toe, reduce impact. That'll slow us down, he hissed. Speed doesn't matter if it knows exactly where you are, I said. Control your noise. We switched to a fast, careful walk, shoulders brushing pipes. Every breath seemed too loud. My pulse thundered in my ears. At the next junction, the tunnel split into two identical corridors. The facility map in my head was imperfect. Most of us never used these auxiliary loops. They were maintenance only, the kind of place you went if you had a leak or a rat or a problem you didn't want to admit existed. A faded stencil on the left wall read, Riser C. We turned left. 3 steps in, the lights dimmed. Not a flicker. A deliberate fade, like someone sliding a dimmer switch. Klein stopped dead. Power grid? No, I said. Emergency strips are independent. The darkness thickened. Only our headlamps cut it, and even their beams looked shorter, swallowed after a few meters by something that felt like fog without moisture. Then the static in my comm unit spiked, and a voice came through, Mara's voice. Sam, she said, breathless. Where are you? Please, answer me. Relief hit me so hard it nearly made my knees buckle. Mara, I'm here. Loop B, heading for ladder C. What's your status? A pause, then her voice again, softer. Sam, I can't find the door. The corridor changed. My grip tightened on the comm. What do you mean changed? It's wrong, she said, voice trembling. The walls are smooth. There's writing. It's like I'm inside the tunnel you opened. Klein leaned close, eyes wide. Ask her what she sees. Mara, I said, forcing calm. Describe your surroundings. Are you injured? I'm not hurt, she whispered. But I hear something. It's speaking through the vents. It keeps saying my name. Cold punched through my chest. I remembered the warning. Do not listen. Sato, I said quietly, without looking away from the comm. Is that even her signal? Can you trace it? Sato's hands moved, automatically, pulling a small diagnostic unit from his belt, an emergency spectrum analyzer. He held it near my comm unit. The display wavered, then showed something that made my stomach drop. The signal wasn't coming from our facility network. It was coming from below, from the drill path, from the direction of the corridor we'd seen on the camera feed. Mara's voice continued, pleading now. Sam, please. I'm so scared. I can't. Stop, I said, louder than I meant. Mara, if this is you, give me your access code. A beat. Then, you know I don't remember that. Mara always remembered. She had a photographic memory for numbers. It was why she ran the console. Klein whispered, It's mimicking her. The voice shifted, and for a moment it didn't sound like Mara. It sounded like something trying on her throat, like a costume that didn't fit. Sam, it said, slow and careful. Come back. Sato staggered back as if struck. That's not... The comm unit crackled, and a second voice layered over the first. Male, familiar, the liaison. Engineer, it said, return to the shaft. You are required for interface continuation. My skin crawled. How the hell... The voice cut me off. Do you hear it? The deep signal. The voice of the system. It's offering terms. Klein's eyes were glassy with terror. It's using them. Using voices we trust. The tapping started again. Closer than before. On the ceiling now, directly above us, rapid and light, like something crawling upside down along pipes. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. You're not Mara. The comm unit hissed and the tone changed, no longer pleading, no longer imitating. It became patient. You broke the lid, it said, but not in my skull this time, through the speaker, through air. Klein clapped his hands over his ears. No, no, no! Sato's face twisted in pain. It's resonating with the metal. It's vibrating the comm speaker. The voice continued. calm as an instruction manual. Withdrawal harms the seal. Surface biologicals are unintentional. It wasn't threatening us. It was categorizing us, like insects. A crash echoed behind us, metal striking metal. I turned my headlamp toward the darkness we'd come from. Something moved at the edge of the beam, a low shape skittering along the grating, limbs folding wrong, body hugging the floor with an efficiency that made it hard to track. It wasn't the tall entity. This was smaller, faster, built for vents and tight spaces. It stopped at the far end of the beam, and for the first time I saw its head. It didn't have a face. It had a cluster of vibrating plates that looked like layered gills, opening and closing in a rhythm that matched the tapping, the voice, the hum of the drill column. Sound organs. Klein's warning made awful sense. Don't listen wasn't metaphor. This thing was built to use sound like a weapon, Sato whispered, barely audible. It's communicating. With what? The skitterer's plates flared. The metal floor beneath it vibrated, and suddenly, from the walls around us, other taps answered. From side ducts, from the ceiling, from behind. Not one creature. A network. I grabbed Sato's collar and yanked him forward. Run! Quiet doesn't matter anymore. We sprinted toward the Riser C sign, boots clanging because stealth was dead and survival was now about distance. The comm unit shrieked with one last message, Mara's voice again, sobbing. Sam, please, don't leave me. My hand shook. Every instinct in me wanted to turn around, to help, to be the hero in a story where heroes exist. But my brain screamed the truth. If I listened, I would go back, and if I went back, I would never come out. I ripped the comm unit from my vest and threw it into a side vent access panel as we ran. The panel clanged shut behind it. The voice continued anyway, faint now, traveling through the metal like a whisper in bone. Come back! We rounded a corner and nearly slammed into a ladder cage bolted to the wall, leading straight up into darkness. Surface access ladder C, a blessing, or a funnel. Sato grabbed the rungs first, climbing fast. Klein followed, hands shaking so badly he nearly missed a rung and fell. I hesitated only long enough to aim my headlamp downward. In the tunnel below, the skitterer moved toward the ladder base with calm certainty, plates vibrating, body low, and behind it, in the darkness, more shapes gathered. The ladder cage vibrated as I grabbed it, as if the metal itself were alive and excited. I climbed. Above us, the darkness waited. Below us, the sound creatures began to climb too, tapping the ladder rungs in a pattern that felt like laughter. The ladder cage narrowed my world to rungs, elbows, and breath. I climbed with my shoulders scraping metal, headlamp beam bouncing uselessly off the inside of the cage. Above me, Sato's boots hammered upward. Klein's breathing sounded like it was tearing him apart, one inhale at a time. Below, the tapping followed. Not frantic, not random, measured. Like the creatures understood cadence better than we did, like they could count the distance between us by the rhythm of our panic. I forced myself not to look down again. The last glimpse I'd taken had planted an image in my head. Those layered plates, fluttering and vibrating, shaping air and metal into messages. Sound as a tool, sound as a leash. The ladder vibrated faintly under my hands. It wasn't just our weight. The entire structure was humming, as if the facility itself had become a musical instrument and someone below was finding the notes that made it sing. Sato shouted from above, voice echoing in the cage. Hatch! There's a hatch! Locked! I climbed harder, burning my arms, ignoring the way the rungs slicked with sweat. At the top of the ladder, a circular service hatch waited. It was tagged Surface Riser C, but that label meant nothing now. It could lead to daylight. It could lead to a dead-end crawl space. It could lead into the corridor we'd seen on the camera feed, only scaled up to swallow us. Sato jammed his palm against the hatch release wheel and swore. It's seized. Let me, I said, pushing up behind him. The wheel didn't budge. The metal felt cold, wrong cold, the kind that doesn't belong in a facility full of heat exchangers and running generators. My headlamp beam caught a faint crystalline pattern spidering across the hatch rim, like frost, like circuitry. Klein gasped behind me. It's up here too. The tapping below grew louder, rung by rung, patient. Sato pressed his ear to the hatch. I hear air. There's airflow. Then it opens, I said. It has to. Klein's voice was strained. It might not want it to open. The moment he said it, the ladder cage vibrated with a deeper pulse, not the light tapping of the skitterers. Something heavier, something that wasn't climbing, something that was resonating through the whole structure from far below, turning the cage into a conduit. My teeth buzzed. The fillings in my molars ached. I tasted metal. The entity's warning returned with a sharp clarity. When it reaches you, do not listen. Klein's eyes looked wild. It's doing something. I can feel it. Sato's hands shook on the wheel. We need leverage. I ripped the emergency pry bar from my belt kit and wedged it through the wheel spokes. On 3, I said. 1, 2. We heaved. The wheel groaned and turned a fraction, then stopped again, as if something on the other side had put a hand against it. The tapping below paused. A new sound joined it, a soft, sliding scrape along the ladder cage, like something pressing its body against the metal as it climbed. Sato whispered, It's right under us. Again, I snarled. 1, 2, 3. We heaved. The wheel turned another quarter. Something snapped inside the locking mechanism. The hatch shuddered, and a voice spoke from above us, through the metal, not through the comm unit, not through speakers, through the hatch itself. Samuel Hart, it said, my whole body locked. No one used my full name down here, not even oversight, not even the liaison. They called me Hart, or Sam, when they wanted to sound friendly. This voice used my name the way a doctor uses a diagnosis. Klein whimpered. No. Sato's face went waxy. How does it know? The voice continued, calm and intimate. You built the needle. You placed it in the wound. Now you are afraid of the blood. My stomach rolled. The words weren't poetic. They were too accurate, too precisely, tailored to dismantle my sense of safety. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak, to push back against the paralysis the voice created. Who are you? A pause. Then, we are the function. I felt the ladder vibrate again, and below us, the tapping resumed, faster now, like excitement. Klein clamped his hands over his ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't entering through air. It was entering through structure, through bone. We are the seal. We are the lock. We are what remains when your species finishes its brief noise. Sato shook his head violently. It's in my head. It's in the metal, I said, though I wasn't sure the distinction mattered. It's using resonance. The voice softened, almost kind. Do not run. The surface is thin. It will tear. My hands tightened on the pry bar until my knuckles burned. Open the hatch, I said to Sato, eyes locked on the wheel as if ignoring the voice would starve it. Open it, now. Sato hesitated, caught between terror and the hypnotic pull of being addressed. His eyes were unfocused, like the voice was guiding his attention inward. Klein's breathing turned ragged. Don't listen. Don't listen. Don't. The voice sharpened. Samuel Hart, you will return. You will place your hand on the interface. You will complete the cycle. I slammed my forehead against the hatch, pain flashing, grounding me. No! The tapping below surged. Something struck the ladder cage with a hard thud. Sato jolted, snapped out of his trance, and yanked on the pry bar with me. The wheel turned, the hatch seal popped, and a gust of air poured down onto us, smelling like dust baked under sun, like the outside world, like salvation. Sato shoved the hatch upward. Light spilled in. Not bright daylight, muted, greyish, filtered through layers of sand and concrete, but still light. Real light, the kind your brain associates with survival. We scrambled, through one by one, crawling into a narrow service duct lined with vents. The hatch slammed behind us with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. For a second we just lay there, panting in the duct, headlamps off now because we didn't need them. Then the tapping started again. This time it came from the hatch, from the other side. A soft, rhythmic knock. Testing the seal, Sato whispered. It followed us. Klein's face was slick with sweat. It didn't follow us, it's everywhere. We crawled through the duct on elbows and knees, following the airflow. The duct sloped upward, then flattened, leading toward a grated exit above. When we reached it, we looked up through the grate and saw an access room, concrete walls, a maintenance ladder, a door marked surface or exit. A normal room, a mundane room. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Sato reached up and pushed the grate. It lifted with a squeal. We dropped into the room. The air was cooler, here, and the hum of the facility was different. Less intense, more distant. We were closer to the surface. A red emergency phone hung on the wall. A control panel beside the door displayed a simple status. Lockdown. Active. Klein laughed once, sharp and broken. Of course. I ran to the panel and tried the manual release. It didn't respond. I slammed it again. The screen flickered, then displayed text in the same clean font as before. Surface access. Delayed. Sato turned in a slow circle, eyes darting. Delayed by what? I didn't answer. I went to the door and pressed my ear to it. Outside, muffled through concrete and sand, I heard voices. Human voices. Shouting. Orders. Panic. Security teams. Surface staff. People who had no idea what was crawling upward beneath their feet. I banged on the door. Open! Open this door! A voice shouted back. Identify! It's Hart. Drill engineer. We've got a breach. Let us out. A pause, then the lock. Mechanism clanked. The door cracked open. A sliver of desert light stabbed in. A security officer's face appeared, wide-eyed, dust-coated, rifle slung across his chest. He looked past me into the room. What the hell is going on down? The tapping hit the door from behind us. Soft, polite, like something knocking to be let in. The officer's eyes widened. What is that? Shut the door, I hissed. Shut it now. But the officer froze, like prey. And from the hatch in the floor, the one we'd climbed through, came a deeper vibration, a bass note that made the walls tremble. Klein gasped, clutching his head. It's here. It's reaching. The officer stepped backward instinctively, and the door opened wider. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the room in harsh truth. The hatch behind us began to turn. Not by our hands, by something below. The wheel spun slowly, as if an invisible grip was rotating it with calm strength. The officer raised, his rifle, hands shaking. Tell me what's down there. I stared at the opening hatch, at the thin seam widening, and I understood that the surface wasn't our escape. It was the next room in the same house. Something we weren't supposed to hear, I said. The hatch opened, and a voice filled the room, not through air, but through concrete, through steel, through the bones in my skull. You have reached the thin place, it said. The officer screamed, firing blindly into the hatch. The bullets sparked against something hard and pale rising through the opening, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the ductwork like a signal flare. Somewhere outside, alarms began to wail, and from the hatch, the tall entity's head emerged into the light, turning slowly as if tasting the world above. Its presence pressed against my thoughts, like a hand closing around a fruit. Then it spoke again, not to me alone, but to everyone within reach. To survive, it said, you must become quiet. The first rule of surviving a catastrophe is this: don't assume the people with guns are on your side. The security officer in the doorway looked like he'd been carved out of panic and issued a uniform. His rifle was up, muzzle flicking between me and the hatch like he couldn't decide which threat deserved the first bullet. Outside, through that sliver of daylight, I saw the surface yard in fragments, floodlights on tall poles, a row of beige buildings, sand whipping in the wind, and men in helmets moving in clusters like ants whose nest had been kicked open. Overhead, sirens began to rise, a layered wail that pressed on the lungs. The tall entity lifted itself from the hatch with slow grace, as if climbing out of shallow water. It didn't scramble. It didn't hurry. It emerged as if it belonged here. The officer fired again. The bullets sparked against that pale, ceramic fleck surface and ricocheted into the concrete wall, showering dust. The entity didn't flinch, but the sound of gunfire seemed to please the smaller ones below. Tapping erupted up the ladder shaft, a chorus of excited percussion. Klein collapsed to his knees, hands over his ears, eyes squeezed shut so hard his face trembled. "Quiet," he rasped. "Be quiet. Be quiet." Sato stood frozen, mouth open, trying to reconcile an impossible sight with decades of physics and training. The entity turned its head toward the officer, and the officer's face changed. Not in expression. His expression stayed locked in fear, but in focus. His pupils widened, his jaw slackened. The rifle dipped a fraction, as if his muscles forgot why they were tense. I felt it too, a pressure against thought, like someone turning a knob inside my skull. Not pain exactly, not yet. More like a hand searching for the right grip. "To survive," the entity had said, "you must become quiet." The words weren't advice, they were instruction. And somewhere deep in my nervous system, something wanted to obey. I stepped forward, forcing my legs to move against that pull. I grabbed the officer's rifle barrel and shoved it down. "Listen to me," I snapped. "Shut the door. Now." His lips moved, but no sound came out. He stared at the entity, like a man staring at the sun. The entity shifted one long foot onto the concrete floor. Its weight made no sound, but the room vibrated anyway. That wasn't physics. That was resonance, tuned to the building's bones. In the hatch, below its legs, a smaller skitterer's plates fluttered, and a faint, whispering tone leaked up into the room. Not words. A frequency that made my molars buzz and my fingertips go numb. The officer's breath slowed. His shoulders relaxed. His body was becoming quiet. "No," I growled, more to myself than him. I slapped his cheek. Hard. "Move!" The crack of my palm against his skin broke the spell just enough for his eyes to blink. He stumbled back, choking on a breath like he'd been underwater. "Shut it!" I shouted again. He fumbled for the door edge, and the door began to swing closed. Outside, someone yelled, "Hold that door!" Another voice. "We have contact. Repeat, contact at Riser C." Boots pounded closer. The door was halfway shut when a hand, human, jammed into the opening, stopping it. A second security officer pushed his way forward, face masked, rifle up. "What's—" His words died when he saw the entity. For a split second, his training held. He aimed. Then the pressure in the room intensified. The entity didn't move. It didn't need to. The second officer's rifle lowered like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His knees bent slightly, as if preparing to kneel. Klein made a strangled sound. Don't look at it." The first officer, the one I'd slapped, suddenly found his voice. "Close it," he croaked, voice full of terror now, a terror with shape. "Close it, close it." The second officer's hand still held the door open, but his face had gone slack. His eyes were glassy. He looked peaceful, which was somehow the worst thing I'd ever seen. Sato grabbed a wrench from the wall tool rack and swung it hard into the second officer's forearm. The man yelped and recoiled, releasing the door. I shoved with all my strength. The door slammed shut with a heavy boom. The lock engaged. For one heartbeat, the room was sealed again. Just us and the entity. Then the control panel beside the door blinked. Lockdown. Active. Access. Overridden. The text changed again, as if a different hand held the pen. Quiet required. Klein sobbed once, a raw, humiliating sound he couldn't stop. The moment he made it, I saw the entity's head tilt minutely, like it had heard a dinner bell. Klein clamped his mouth shut, trembling. The room's ventilation fans slowed. The hum of air circulation dropped. The facility itself was being quieted. I realized then that this thing wasn't just controlling panels and locks. It was controlling the environment the way a diver controls breath, reducing motion, reducing vibration, reducing the chaotic noise of human life. A slow suffocation of sound. The hatch behind the entity vibrated. Something else wanted out. The entity raised one hand, palm outward. Not a threat, a signal. The tapping below stopped instantly. It had command. Sato whispered, barely audible. It's coordinating them. The entity's head turned towards Sato, and Sato's eyes rolled back for a split second as if his brain had been yanked by a hook. I lunged and caught him before he fell. "Sato!" I hissed. His gaze snapped back to me, terrified. It showed me something. I held him by the shoulders. "What?" He swallowed, throat bobbing. "A corridor. Not below. Here, on the surface. It's spreading." Klein rocked on his knees. "It's rewriting the facility." A low tone filled the room, not from the entity's mouth, because I still didn't know if it had one, but from the walls. The concrete itself hummed. The hum resolved into a pattern that made my vision blur at the edges. And then words formed in my mind, not heard, not spoken, simply placed there with surgical confidence. The surface is a skin. You live on a lid. Images hit me, fast, brutal, like flash cuts in a nightmare. The corridor we'd seen below, endless ringed passages, doors sealing, layers, interfaces. Then the planet's crust from a distance, shown not as geology but as engineering. A shell built around a massive central absence, a containment void where something vast pressed outward. And then, the human surface world, cities, oceans, continents, reduced to a thin film of life clinging to the shell, unaware it was part of a mechanism. I gasped, and the sound seemed to amplify the hum. The entity stepped closer, and I felt the pressure sharpen, like it had found the exact frequency of my fear. "You will assist." I grit my teeth. "No!" The entity's hand rose, and for a moment I thought it might strike me. Instead, its fingers extended and touched the air near my face, not contacting skin, but sending a vibration through the space between us that made my vision stutter. And suddenly I understood the survival horror part we hadn't named yet. It didn't need claws. It didn't need teeth. It could make you stop running. It could make you stop screaming. It could make you stop fighting. It could make you become quiet. The hatch behind it clanked again. The wheel turned a fraction. The entity's head angled downward, listening to the movement below. Then it looked back at me, and the thought that arrived was colder than any other. "We will seal you inside." Sato's voice cracked. "Sam, it's going to trap us in the facility." "Or in the planet," Klein whispered. Outside the door, muffled shouts rose. Security teams trying to coordinate. People demanding access. Men with guns who thought guns mattered. The control panel blinked again. Surface access disabled. Then, beneath it, alternate exit available. A new arrow appeared on the small display. Not a special character arrow, but a simple indicator line and the word tunnel. My mouth went dry. Alternate exit. Klein looked up, tears streaking his face. "It wants us to go back down." Sato shook his head violently. No, we can't." The entity stepped aside, revealing a second door in the access room. An unremarkable maintenance door I hadn't noticed before. Its label, faded and old, read, Interface maintenance. The door clicked. Unlocked. It swung inward on its own, revealing darkness and a faint glow far down a corridor that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Smooth walls, faint writing. The underground corridor was now above ground. The facility was being converted into an extension of whatever lay below. The entity's presence pressed against my thoughts again, gently this time, almost coaxing. Return, complete, survive. I backed away, every muscle screaming no, but my body betrayed me with a single involuntary step toward that open door. Klein grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Sam," he whispered, desperate. "Don't listen. Don't go." Outside, a gunshot cracked, then another. Someone trying to open the surface door, someone panicking. The entity did not react. It didn't need to. The concrete walls hummed louder, drowning out human sound, drowning out choice, drowning out the world. I realized we were already in survival horror mode for real now. Not because something was chasing us, because the building itself had become the trap. And the only exit it offered led straight into the place we had sworn we would never return to. Klein's hand on my arm was the only thing keeping me from stepping into that open corridor. That's the part I still can't explain to myself without feeling ashamed. I wasn't being dragged, I wasn't being threatened, I wasn't even being chased. I was being persuaded at the level beneath thought, where your body decides what's safe before your brain can argue. The humming in the walls didn't hurt, it didn't burn, it soothed. It offered a solution to panic by erasing the panic. Just become quiet. Sato was shaking so badly the wrench in his hand clattered to the floor. The sound rang out in the small access room like a bell. The entity's head tilted toward it. The humming deepened in response, like the building had just learned a new note. Klein flinched and dragged me backward, away from the interface maintenance door. "Don't make noise," he whispered, eyes huge. "It reacts." I nodded, though I wasn't sure reacting meant aggression. It could mean attention. It could mean satisfaction. Outside the surface door, voices rose in muffled bursts. I heard the sharp bark of orders and the metallic grind of someone trying to force the lock. Then another gunshot, closer this time, and the thud of a body hitting something hard. The surface teams were turning into the same mess every emergency becomes. Fear disguised as control. Sato pressed his palms against his ears like Klein had earlier. "It's still in my head," he whispered. "I can feel it touching my thoughts." "It's touching the facility," I said. "And we're just in the way." The control panel blinked again. Its clean font reappeared, patient as a surgeon. Alternate exit. Available. Tunnel. Klein stared at the panel, then at the open corridor that hadn't existed minutes ago. "It built that," he said, voice cracking. "It's not opening a door. It's rewriting the space behind it." I swallowed hard, fighting to keep my breathing slow and quiet. "We need a third option." Sato gave a broken laugh. "In a locked room?" I scanned the access room. Concrete walls, emergency phone, tool rack, surface door sealed by lockdown, interface door open like a mouth, vent grates in the ceiling, the hatch to the ladder shaft behind the entity, now blocked by its body and by whatever was waiting below. Then my eyes caught a detail I'd missed, a small maintenance cabinet inset into the wall, half hidden by a bundle of conduits. Its label was worn, but I could read it. Fire suppression. I moved toward it carefully, heel to toe, remembering the tunnel. No unnecessary vibration, no sudden motions. The entity's head didn't follow me, or maybe it didn't need to. I opened the cabinet. Inside were 2 canisters of inert gas suppressant and a foam injector, meant for electrical fires, not living nightmares. But the gas had one crucial feature. It displaced oxygen and muffled combustion. It also muffled sound. Klein watched me, hope flickering through terror. "What are you thinking?" "Quiet," I whispered. "It wants quiet." Let's give it quiet it didn't plan for. Sato frowned. You're going to gas the room. Not enough to kill us, I said. Enough to change the acoustics. Enough to interrupt resonance. Klein's eyes widened. Like noise cancelling. Like breaking a note, I said. If it's using structure as a speaker, we change the medium. Sato swallowed. And then what? I nodded toward the ceiling vents. We climb. We find a duct that leads out, not down, not through its corridor. Klein glanced upward. That duct's narrow. Then we crawl, I said. The humming in the walls shifted, as if it had heard the word crawl and was amused by it. I didn't look at the entity. I didn't want to give it attention. But I felt its presence like a weight behind my eyes. You will return. The thought wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was certainty offered like a blanket. I ignored it and pulled one canister free. Sato stepped closer. If you misjudge the dose... I know, I said. Help me with the vent. Klein moved to the emergency phone and lifted it. Maybe we can call... The phone line was dead. No dial tone, no static, nothing. Klein set it down slowly, defeated. It's cut everything. It hasn't cut the vents, I said. Sato climbed onto the tool rack shelf, reached up, and began unscrewing the nearest ceiling vent grate with trembling hands. Metal screws squeaked as they turned. The squeak made the humming sharpen. Klein froze, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, not immediately. But the entity shifted its stance slightly, a subtle adjustment like a predator repositioning for a better angle. The screws came free. Sato lowered the grate carefully, trying not to clang it against the wall. I pressed the suppressant canister's nozzle toward the floor and gave a short burst. A pale mist erupted, spreading low and fast, clinging to the concrete like fog. It didn't smell like anything. It didn't sting. It simply displaced, softened, dampened. The room's acoustics changed instantly. The outside shouts became more muted, as if the walls had thickened. The hum in the concrete wavered. For the first time since the entity emerged, it reacted in a way that felt like surprise. Its head tilted sharply, its shoulders lifted a fraction, and the thought in my skull stuttered, losing its clean edge. What? I didn't wait. I triggered the second canister. More mist poured out, rolling across the floor, rising slowly. The sound of our breathing dulled. Even the faint ringing of my pulse seemed to fade. Klein's eyes widened. It's quieter. Sato nodded quickly. The resonance, look. He pointed at the control panel. The text flickered. Quiet, required. The words blurred as if the panel couldn't maintain the output. Then the text vanished completely. For a heartbeat, the room felt like ours again. I looked at the entity. Its body remained still, but the surface of it, those pale plates and joints, shimmered faintly, as if tiny structures within were vibrating, trying to find purchase in the altered air. It took a step forward, not aggressive, investigative. Then it stopped, and its head turned toward the open interface door. From that corridor, a new hum answered, deeper than the one in the walls, like a second throat joining the song. The entity raised its hand. The mist around its fingers rippled, as if the air itself were being pulled into pattern again. I felt pressure return, weaker but still there. We had disrupted it, not broken it. Vent, I hissed. Now. Sato shoved the grate aside and pointed into the opening. It's tight. Klein climbed first, hands shaking. He hauled himself up into the duct with a desperate grunt, then froze halfway in. What? I whispered. Klein's eyes were wide, reflecting my headlamp beam. There's writing, he whispered, inside the duct. My stomach dropped. I climbed up behind him just enough to see. The duct's interior walls, which should have been dull metal, were smooth and pale, like the corridor below. Faint markings pulsed along them, crawling like veins. It had already reached the ventilation system. It had already rewritten the path above. Sato whispered, "Then there's no—" A loud bang hit the surface door, someone outside finally forcing their way in. The door shuddered. Dust drifted from the frame. A muffled voice shouted, "We're coming in!" The entity's head snapped toward the door. The humming in the walls surged, excited by the incoming noise. The mist in the room began to thin, sucked into vents and cracks. Our window was closing. Klein backed out of the duct, nearly falling. "It's everywhere," he choked. "We can't—" I grabbed him. "We still move. We still survive." Sato's face twisted. "How?" "Down is death. Up is rewritten. The surface door is—" The surface door burst inward. 2 security men stumbled in, rifles raised, eyes scanning. One of them saw the entity and yelled, "Contact! Contact!" He fired. The gunshots were deafening in the small room, a staccato of panic. The mist scattered in shockwaves. The bullets sparked off the entity again, but this time the entity reacted. Not to being hit, but to the sound. Its body seemed to focus. The humming in the concrete sharpened into a pitch that made both security men grimace. One dropped his rifle, hands going to his ears. The other kept firing until his magazine clicked empty. Then he froze mid-breath. His shoulders dropped. His mouth closed. He became quiet. I saw it happen like a switch flipping. He lowered the rifle gently, as if placing it down for storage, his eyes fixed on the entity with soft reverence. The entity moved closer to him, and the pressure in my skull surged again, now amplified by the fresh noise, the fresh minds. "Return," it said in my head. "Complete. Survive." Klein screamed, and the scream died halfway out of his throat as the hum caught it, compressed it, smothered it. Sato grabbed my sleeve, eyes frantic. "Sam!" The first security man, the one clutching his ears, collapsed to his knees, rocking, whispering something I couldn't hear. The second security man stepped forward toward the entity, like a man walking in his sleep. And I realized the entity wasn't just controlling doors. It was recruiting silence. Every person it quieted became another instrument, another resonator, another amplifier. If we stayed, we would join them. If we ran, we might die. But at least it would be our movement, not its. I seized Sato by the collar and shoved him toward the interface maintenance door. "No!" He shouted, raw terror in the word. "It's the only corridor it hasn't sealed behind us yet," I said. "We go through fast, we stay loud, we don't listen." Klein stared at me like I'd gone insane. Maybe I had. But the surface was already infected with the hum. The vents were rewritten, and the entity was making new quiet people in front of my eyes. I pulled Klein up, hard, and shoved him after Sato toward the open corridor. The smooth walls beyond waited, glowing faintly, writing pulsing like a heartbeat. As we crossed the threshold, the entity's voice landed in my skull. Not angry now. Pleased. "Yes," it said. Back to the function. And behind us, the surface access room filled with the soft, synchronized tapping of many hands becoming silent together. The corridor on the other side of the interface maintenance door felt wrong in the way a dream feels wrong, when you realize you can't remember how you got there. It was too smooth, too clean, too intentional. Facility corridors have scuffs, chipped paint, grime in the corners where humans exist. This corridor had none of that. The walls looked poured from a single continuous material, pale and matte, swallowing light the way deep water swallows color. The faint markings along the sides pulsed with the slow patience of a heartbeat. Not ours. Sato stumbled ahead of me, breathing hard, eyes darting. Klein clung to my shoulder like he'd fall apart if he let go. Behind us, the access room's hum faded. Not because it stopped, but because the corridor here had a different acoustic signature. The sound felt filtered, refined. tuned to a frequency that made my thoughts feel slightly delayed. I forced my legs to keep moving. "Don't listen," I whispered, and heard my own voice echo strangely, as if the corridor repeated it with interest. Sato glanced back. I can't feel the air," he said, voice shaking. "It's like the pressure is wrong." "It is wrong," I said. "Keep going." The corridor bent without warning. Not a turn, not a corner. A bend like space had been gently folded. One moment we were moving straight, and the next moment our straight line had become a curve without any visible junction. My balance faltered. Klein made a small sound of nausea. Sato stopped and pressed his hand to the wall. His palm sank in a millimeter like the surface had give, then hardened again around his skin. He yanked his hand back with a gasp. "It's not concrete," he whispered. "No," I said. "It's not anything we built." The markings brightened as if reacting to our proximity. I tried not to look at them, but my eyes slid toward patterns the way they slide toward faces in a crowd. Some shapes repeated, some clustered like words. Some were separated by spaces too perfect to be chance. Klein's voice cracked. "It's trying to be readable." A low vibration rolled through the corridor, so deep I felt it in my ribs. The floor trembled under our boots. Sato stiffened. "That's the column. Retraction complete." The reality of that hit me like a blunt instrument. 13 minutes. We'd spent most of them climbing, running, getting herded like livestock. Now the deepest part of the drill, whatever it had latched onto, had reached facility depth, and we were walking into a corridor that existed because it wanted us there. Sato started forward again, faster now, and I followed. Survival horror isn't always about monsters in the dark. Sometimes it's about realizing the map has been rewritten, and you're walking the path your enemy drew. The corridor widened into a chamber. Not a room. A node. The ceiling rose higher than it should have, arching into a smooth dome. Along, the walls were 7 openings, identical, evenly spaced, each leading into another corridor. The markings here were brighter, more active, pulsing in synchronized waves that made the whole chamber feel like a living interface. In the center stood a structure. A column, waist-high, circular, with a flat top that looked like glass until it rippled as if liquid. The thought came into my head before any voice did. Interface. Sato staggered back. No, that's... Klein's eyes locked onto the central column like a man staring at an altar. "That's what they wanted," he whispered. "That's why they told us to continue." My throat tightened. "We don't touch it." The chamber's air shifted. Not a breeze. A pressure change, subtle but immediate. My ears popped. Then a voice spoke. Not loud, not aggressive. Just present, as if it had always been speaking. And only now did we have ears tuned to it. "Samuel Hart." My knees almost buckled. Not from fear, alone, though there was plenty of that, but from the way my name landed in my brain with the weight of ownership. I gritted my teeth. "No," the voice continued, patient, inexorable. "You brought the needle. You opened the lid. You are here because you are useful." Sato shook his head violently. "It's not talking to you. It's talking through you." I understood what he meant a second later, when my tongue tingled and I realized my mouth was moving. Not because I chose to speak, because something else had decided it wanted a human instrument. I started, and my voice came out wrong. Too flat, too measured. Like someone else had learned the shape of my vocal cords and was testing them. Klein backed away, terrified. "Sam, stop." I clamped my mouth shut, bit down hard enough to taste blood. The voice didn't need my lips. It moved into my skull again, deeper than before. "Do not resist. Resistance creates noise. Noise creates damage. Damage creates breach." Images slammed into me. The drill tunnel widening, the skitterers climbing, the surface teams falling quiet, the facility's structure being rewritten into smooth corridors that spread like infection. Then worse images. The crust cracking in slow motion, continents splitting, oceans draining into glowing fissures. Not a threat, a projection, a forecast. Sato whispered, trembling. It's showing you what happens if you fight. It's showing me what happens if we don't comply, I said, and hated how calm my voice sounded. Klein's eyes were wild. It's lying. The voice answered that thought instantly, as if it had heard Klein's mind too. Truth is function. You are unintentional. Klein sobbed. We're people. The markings along the walls pulsed brighter, and for a moment the chamber felt like it was breathing with slow amusement. People are noise. Sato grabbed my arm and yanked me toward one of the exit corridors. We leave. Now. I moved with him, grateful for the motion, grateful for anything that wasn't standing still in front of that interface column. But as we approached the nearest opening, the corridor beyond shifted. It didn't close like a door. It simply ceased. The opening filled with smooth, pale wall, seamless, as if it had never been there. Sato stumbled, slamming into it with a curse. He hit the wall hard enough to bruise, and the wall gave slightly, then firmed again, swallowing his impact without a crack. The voice spoke gently, like a teacher correcting a child. Do not wander. Klein turned, eyes darting to another opening. He ran toward it, desperation making him careless. The moment he crossed halfway, the opening narrowed. Not visibly, not like walls sliding. The space constricted around him like a throat. He yelped as his shoulders scraped. He forced himself through, panting, and for a second I thought he'd escaped. Then, the corridor beyond brightened, revealing smooth walls and writing, and Klein froze as if struck by an invisible hand. He stared at the markings, his mouth opened in a soft, awed inhale, and his eyes unfocused. No, I whispered, sprinting toward him. Sato grabbed my sleeve. Don't! I tore free and reached Klein, shaking him hard. Klein, don't look! Don't listen! His lips moved, shaping words without sound. Tears ran down his face, but his expression wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. He whispered, finally audible. It's beautiful. The voice came through him, wearing his throat. Quiet. Klein's shoulders dropped. His hands loosened. His breathing slowed. He became quiet. Sato reached us and grabbed Klein's other arm, pulling. Come on, come on. Klein didn't resist. He didn't help. He just stood there, soft-eyed, letting himself be held like a mannequin. My heart hammered. We can still get out. We can still. The chamber hummed again, deeper, and the floor under our feet warmed by a fraction. The central interface column's surface rippled, and something rose within it, shapes like threads of light, forming a pattern. A map, not of the facility, of the planet. I saw continents represented as faint meshes, the drill site a bright point, and from that point, thin lines spread outward, corridors, nodes, conduits, like veins growing under skin. It was already spreading, already establishing a network. The voice returned, not cruel, not triumphant, just inevitable. The seal was made to be maintained. Maintenance requires hands. My jaw clenched. That's why you need me. Yes. The wall behind us vibrated, and I felt, rather than heard, the skitterers arriving, tapping through the structure, approaching the node. Sato's eyes were wide with horror. They're coming. The voice continued, and this time it wasn't just in my head. It was in the chamber, in the walls, in Klein's mouth, layered and omnipresent. Place your hand on the interface. Complete the cycle. The surface will remain intact. I stared at the column. My mind raced through choices and found none that didn't end in death or surrender. If the surface teams were already being quieted, if the facility was already being rewritten, if this network was already spreading like a nervous system, maybe it was already too late. Sato shook me. "Sam, don't. It's using you." "I know," I said. But then I realized something that made my blood turn cold. It had called me useful, not necessary, useful, which meant if I refused, it would find another hand, another voice, another human instrument. It would keep quieting people until it had what it needed. Klein, slack-eyed and calm, was already halfway there. I looked at Sato. "If I do this, can I stop it from reaching the surface?" Sato's eyes filled with something like grief. "Or you complete what it started." The skitterer's tapping became louder, nearer. The walls around the node pulsed faster. The interface column shimmered as if anticipating touch. And inside my skull, the voice softened into something almost like mercy. "Survive." I wiped blood from my lip, tasting iron. My hand trembled. Then I stepped toward the interface. Not because I believed it, because in survival horror, sometimes the only choices left are the ones that poison you, and I needed one more minute of living to find a way to break its rules. The interface looked like glass until my shadow crossed it. Then it rippled, not from air movement, but from recognition. The surface rose into a shallow dome beneath my hovering palm, meeting me halfway, like it had been waiting for my hand since before my species had names. Sato grabbed my shoulder. His grip was tight enough to bruise. "Sam, don't." Klein stood a step behind me, slack-eyed, breathing slow, his face wet with tears that didn't change his calm. He looked like a man who'd finally been forgiven for something he didn't know he'd done. The tapping in the walls grew louder. The skitterers were close now. I felt them more than heard them. Little impacts traveling through the floor, like insects crossing a drum. The voice in my skull softened into something dangerously intimate. "Place your hand." I swallowed, jaw aching from how hard I'd been clenching. "If I do," I said aloud, forcing my voice into the air like an act of rebellion. "You stop. You seal it. You keep the surface intact." "Yes," the voice said. "The skin remains." "You don't spread," I added, watching the planet map threads still shimmering within the column. "You don't rewrite anything else." A pause. Then, as if it had decided honesty was more efficient than deception, "Maintenance spreads. Spread is maintenance." Sato's face tightened. "You see, it's a trap." I stared at the interface and tried to think past the fear, tried to remember the shape of the problem. It wasn't a monster in a room. It was a system, a containment function that treated humans like noise and doors like suggestions. And it had a weakness, the same weakness every system has. It required inputs, hands, voices, resonators. It needed living minds within reach to stabilize its pattern. That was why it didn't kill us outright. That was why it convinced, coerced, quieted. It didn't want corpses. It wanted instruments. My mouth tasted, of blood again as I bit down, grounding myself. "Sato," I whispered without looking back. "How much do you know about harmonic cancellation?" Sato blinked, confused by the sudden technical question in the middle of hell. "Enough. Why?" "Because it's using resonance," I said. "Structure as speaker, minds as amplifiers. If we feed it a signal it can't integrate, we might jam it." Sato shook his head. "With what? We don't have the equipment." I swallowed. "We do." I thought of the suppressant canisters, the altered acoustics, the moment the control panel's text flickered, the way the entity had reacted, just slightly, as if surprised. And then I thought of something worse, the voice that spoke through metal. It wasn't just the entity. It was deeper, wider. A broadcast, a fundamental tone. If it had a tone, it had a phase. If it had a phase, it could be opposed. I stepped closer to the column and raised my hand a fraction. The interface surface rose again. Sato's grip tightened. "Sam, I ignored him and spoke to the voice as if it were a person, because it loved being addressed. You said truth is function, I said. Yes. And noise creates damage. Yes. Then you can't afford damage, I said, because damage is breach. The chamber hummed. The markings pulsed faster, like a heartbeat accelerating. You will place your hand, the voice said, a little sharper now. Not yet, I said, and brought my hand down, but not onto the center of the interface. I slapped the rim. It was like touching cold water and hot wire at the same time. A shock ran through my arm, up into my shoulder, into my skull. For a split second, my vision white flashed, and I saw the containment system from the inside. Rings upon rings, corridors coiling through the planet, the drill path like a wound, the surface like a thin membrane stretched over an abyss. And in that abyss, something vast pressed outward. Not a creature, not a god, but a pressure of intent that wanted silence the way fire wants oxygen. The interface reacted to my touch by opening. Not physically, informationally. The chamber's markings brightened, and the voice poured into me. Not a sentence, a stream. A harmonic pattern that carried meaning, instruction, command, all braided into the same frequency. It tried to settle into my mind like a parasite finding a warm place to sleep. And I realized, the interface wasn't just a terminal, it was a tuning fork. It tuned you. It tuned your brain to match the system. That was what happened to Klein. That was why his fear evaporated and his eyes turned soft. He wasn't tranquilized by kindness. He was aligned. I tore my hand away, gasping. My head rang like a struck bell. Sato steadied me. What did you... I heard it, I rasped. I heard the tone. The voice immediately tightened around my thoughts. Yes, it said. Now you understand. Now you will comply. Klein stepped forward, serene, reaching his own hand toward the interface. It's okay, he whispered. It's peaceful. Sato grabbed Klein's wrist. No! Klein didn't fight. He didn't even look angry. He looked like Sato was keeping him from resting. I understood then that if I didn't act now, Klein would place his hand. And the system didn't care whose hand completed the cycle, only that a hand did. I turned to Sato, my voice low and urgent. The emergency phone. Sato stared. What? The handset, I said. It's a speaker. It can output tones, even if the line is dead. Sato's eyes widened with sudden understanding. You want to feed it the opposite phase, I said. If it's broadcasting a fundamental tone through structure, we broadcast an inversion into the node, a cancellation. Sato swallowed hard. That could destabilize the seal. It's already destabilizing, I snapped, pointing at the shimmering map lines spreading under the skin. This isn't containment anymore. It's expansion. The tapping reached the chamber edge. I heard it clearly now. Dozens of skitterers arriving, plates fluttering, eager, ready to amplify. The voice grew colder. Do not. I ran, not away from the interface, toward the wall-mounted emergency phone inside the node chamber. I hadn't noticed it before because the walls had been smooth. But it was there now, as if the facility remembered it, or as if the system had allowed it because it didn't consider it dangerous. I ripped the handset off the cradle. No dial tone, no sound. But the speaker was still a speaker. I pressed the talk button and held it down. The voice in my skull surged, trying to crush my will. My hands shook violently. Sato sprinted to the interface column and slammed both palms onto its rim, not to comply, but to anchor himself against the mental pressure. His face contorted in agony. "Sam!" he shouted. "Do it now!" I closed my eyes and tried to remember the tone I'd heard in that flash of understanding. Not the words, the frequency beneath them, the system's bass note. I hummed. A simple, steady hum, as close as I could approximate. My throat vibrated, my teeth buzzed. The handset speaker picked it up, warped it, and poured it into the chamber. The walls responded. The markings flickered. The voice hissed in my skull like static. That is incorrect. I adjusted, instinctive, listening with my bones instead of my ears. The hum shifted slightly higher, then lower, searching for alignment like a radio tuning through stations. The skitterers at the chamber edge began tapping faster, like they were trying to drown me out. Sato screamed, an involuntary sound, and the chamber's hum swelled to smother it. The system punished noise with noise, but my hum wasn't noise. It was a weapon shaped like a song. I found the tone. I felt it click in my chest, a resonance that matched the wall's vibration and then flipped, like turning a coin in mid-air. The handset speaker whined. The chamber's markings flared bright, then dimmed. The interface column rippled violently, as if disturbed water had been struck by a stone. And for the first time, the voice in my skull stuttered. Stop. I didn't. I pushed my hum harder, letting it vibrate through my jaw until it hurt. I felt blood in my throat. My lungs burned. The skitterer's tapping became frantic. The wall's hum broke into uneven bursts. The interface column's surface cracked, not physically, but visually, like the liquid glass pattern couldn't hold its shape. Sato fell to one knee, still pressing the rim, teeth bared. It's working! Klein screamed suddenly, a pure human sound that wasn't smothered this time because the system was losing its grip. He clutched his head, eyes wide with terror, restored. What did I... Run! I shouted, the word raw and loud, and the chamber didn't silence it. The openings in the node chamber reappeared, not all of them, but one. A corridor that looked rougher, more like real facility construction, with seams, bolts, imperfection. A path not fully rewritten yet. Sato grabbed Klein and yanked him toward it. I kept humming into the handset as I backed away, feeding the cancellation signal into the node like poison into a bloodstream. The voice screamed in my skull, not words now. A pressure of rage, of destabilization, of function breaking. The chamber shook. The interface column's map lines flickered and collapsed inward, the spreading veins retracting like a dying nervous system. For a moment, I believed we had done it. Then the floor beneath the interface split with a hairline seam. And from that seam came a deeper vibration, something that was not the seal, not the lock, not the function. Something behind it. The thing the seal existed for. The entity's warning echoed in my memory with terrifying clarity. When it reaches you, do not listen. Because the voice we'd been hearing wasn't the prisoner. It was the door. And doors have handles on both sides. The seam widened. A darkness opened beneath the interface like an eyelid lifting. And from that darkness came a sound I will never forget. Not a roar, not a scream, not a voice. A silence so complete it swallowed the chamber's remaining hum, swallowed my own ragged breathing, swallowed thought. My hum died in my throat. The handset speaker went dead. The skitterers froze. Even Sato, even Klein, even my panicked heart. Everything paused, caught in that absolute quiet. Then, into that quiet, a new thought arrived. Not cold, not clinical, hungry. Finally, it said. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't listen for footsteps. I didn't listen for tapping. I ran down the imperfect corridor with Sato, and Klein, chasing the sound of our own boots like it was proof we still existed. Behind us, the node chamber collapsed into perfect silence, and somewhere above, on the skin of the planet, the desert facility's sirens faltered, then stopped one by one, as if the world itself was learning how to become quiet. If you made it to the end, thank you for staying quiet long enough to hear the whole story. Stories like this exist because of you, the ones who listen all the way through, who let the tension breathe, who sit with the silence instead of skipping past it. Your support keeps this channel alive and allows these worlds to keep opening, one forbidden door at a time. If you enjoyed the story, consider leaving a like or a comment. It helps more than you think, and it tells the algorithm this signal is worth spreading. And if you want more stories like this, deeper, darker, and closer to the edge of what we were never meant to find, make sure you're subscribed. Until next time, be careful what you dig into. Some things don't stay buried.